Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. Wonderful to be here with you today. I'm Seth Sam here with you for this full hour. I've got Sam Case and the Studio A team, as we call it, our Philadelphia headquarters here for Financial Issues. Wonderful to have you all with us this morning. Sam, we ready to rock and roll once again?
Of course. My computer says it's Capybara Appreciation Day, fun. So I'm just thrilled. It's giving me so much energy and
delightful. It is delightful. Absolutely. You know what else is delightful, folks? Being here with you. So thank you all for joining us today. Radio audience, welcome to you. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, watch live, of course. The chat is already hopping this morning, so I hope you'll join us on our live chat over on financialissues.org/live. So many of you probably, I know I'm not necessarily thinking this way at this time of the year, probably not thinking about elections, still less than a year removed from, I think, what was one of the biggest, if not the biggest election of our lives, at least for those of us who are younger folks, but I think we should. And so I've got Debbie Wuthnow coming on. She's of iVoter Guide. She's going to join me later in the show to help us keep a good pulse on what we need to know concerning the next big election cycle. I think all eyes, of course, are going to be pointing to the midterms. So we'll be getting Deb's perspective there. I'm excited to have her on again from iVoter Guide. She'll be joining me later in the show. Also, the Trump team setting the terms with a whole host of nations, doing a little wheeling and dealing here and there, giving some take it or leave it offers. We'll make some sense of those as well. Those have been happening throughout the week. Also, your questions and comments, we've got those. If you put those into the chat, we'll make sure to get to those later on in the show. And there's a new anti-woke ETF out there. So we'll take a look at that and ask the question, is it worth investing in? We'll see. Grateful for each of you. Hey, as we start this morning, I would encourage you, please pray for the protection of those impacted by the devastating floods in Texas, now New Mexico as well. Such a tragic loss of life. And I would urge you to pray as well for comfort for the families who lost loved ones, especially children. In those floods. Of course, I'm thinking of the many children who were at Camp Mystic down in Texas, right along the Guadalupe River. So many children sadly lost in that. So pray for comfort and protection for those families. The latest numbers I'm seeing, Sam, is 120 deaths as of this point. There are over 170 people still missing. So, yeah, just please pray.
Yeah, hopefully they find that 170, because that would just add to the tragedy by devastating numbers if most of those people were lost. So let's pray that's not the case.
Yep. Keep them in prayer for sure. Also, folks, a personal thing for me, I have an older brother named Adam. He's a local pastor here at a church. He's currently ministering to some 150 young people right now. They have their annual church camp this week. Really, really big stuff. Usually Thursday of the camp week is the gospel day. That's where they give explicit gospel messages and really try to get these children to understand what Christ did for them. So if you'd lift up my older brother, Adam, that would be great. Let's kick it off here, folks, with some tariffs, new tariff letters, as we mentioned here, Sam. What do you got so far? Some heavy hitters in this group, I'm told.
Yeah, really big ones. Trump sending new letters as of yesterday to the big boys, namely Brunei, Moldova, Algeria, Iraq, Libya, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines. My gosh, Seth, what are we going to do without these guys? That now brings the number of countries receiving Trump's so-called take-it-or-leave-it trade offers to 21, with tariff rates ranging between 20% and 40%, although I think Trump also just recently sent a letter to Brazil saying that tariff rate could be as high as 50%. Brazil says they are going to respond in kind. Those tariffs are going to take effect August 1st. Of course, that is unless the countries do strike some sort of deal with the United States in the meantime.
Yep. Folks, we joke a lot. I mean, it's in tongue in cheek. We're saying these are heavy hitters. Really, they're not heavy hitters. In fact, they're not exactly the big name countries that we're thinking of here. But nonetheless, Sam, I think it does point out this wheeling and dealing to make America great again is in full steam ahead mode, and it has to happen with the little countries. It absolutely does. And so I'm liking what I see here with these smaller countries. And it really is. I mean, the United States is in such a position of the driver's seat, but especially when you're talking about Brunei or Moldova or Libya. Like, there's really no choice there. I mean,
hey, come on, Philippines. That's number 30. That's
right.
our
there
30th biggest trading partner.
There you go. So yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing.
You know, Trump was talking about this, about sending these letters to the smaller countries, and he said, frankly, I don't have the time to individually negotiate with all these smaller countries.
Right.
So we're just going to send out these letters and see what they do. They can respond if they want to. If not, whatever. But I have bigger fish to fry, namely like the EU, India, Japan. He did send a letter to Japan, but I think that was more to slap him across the face a little bit. But these smaller countries, frankly, I don't think Trump really cares what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And some other things that I think could be a good sign here, Sam, but you can maybe correct me on this and tell me. So the U.S. could collect as much as $300 billion in tariff revenue. That's a lot of money.
Well, that's what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says. He says the U.S. so far has taken in about $100 billion in tariff revenue this year. And he's projecting the U.S. could raise, you're right, up to $300 billion by the end of 2025. So the end of this year, not the end of the fiscal year, but the end of the actual calendar year. It gets more exciting than that, Seth, though, as he's projecting that could go up to $2.8 trillion over the next 10 years. And in fact, Bessent says that number would actually be on the low end of the estimations.
So, Sam, when I hear news like this, you're going to have to help me. You have to be my kite string here. I get excited. I'm like, yes, this could mean, just imagine. I mean, picture this for a second, folks, okay? Imagine a world.
I'm putting my imagination cap on. I'm picturing.
Cap on. Listen here. Imagine if taxes are far lessened or even non-existent. Non-existent because the federal government is not funded by property taxes and other forms of legal thievery, but by actual exchange and trade of goods. They're actually providing a good or service. They're actually, there's a transaction happening. That's what funds the federal government. Imagine a world where you don't pay property taxes or you don't pay income tax because tariffs take care of that payment funding the federal government. Sam, is it a pipe dream?
Yes, because you want me to tell you what's really going to happen is the government's going to see $3 trillion more over the next 10 years. And instead of seeing that as a way to save money, they're just going to say, oh boy, we have $3 trillion to spend and waste that money.
That's exactly right. It's the equivalent of, imagine if you get a raise and you're like, you know what? This is great. I'm increasing, it's the old lifestyle creep, increasing my lifestyle. I'm buying a yacht. I'm buying a bigger house. When no, we would actually tell you if you get that raise, you know, that's a blessing from the Lord. You should live the same way that you were. And that's a gift from him then to either pay down debt, to put to your savings, to invest. I wish our federal government listened to financial issues, Sam.
Well, even think about this. You get that raise, but you have, I don't know, $200,000, $500,000 in debt, and then you still choose to spend that money on wasteful things.
Right. It's exactly right. So, Sam, I think you're right. Unfortunately, it is a pipe dream. But, I mean, listen, a guy can imagine, right? A guy can dream. Boy, that would be pretty awesome.
Hope is good for the soul.
Yeah. What it seems to be to me, Sam, and tell me what you think of this, it seems like it's simply Trump's getting fair deals done on the U.S., getting us on a fair playing field with worldwide trade. And this revenue is kind of a bonus, kind of icing
on the cake, for sure. Yeah.
And, you know, of course, for us, I mean, $300 billion is a lot of money. For the United States federal government, it's not that much money when you consider our debt. For example, we're in the trillions. We're talking about trillions there. Either way, Sam, you know, I'm a happy camper, but boy, I'd be so much more of a happy camper if maybe those tariff funds were cutting down on taxes a little bit, but probably won't end up happening.
It'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would be pretty cool. As you've heard Shanna say, folks, it's very important to remember the likelihood of taxes increasing in the future is much higher than decreasing. Taxes will probably be higher in the future than they are today. That's just the way things go. I don't like it. You probably don't like it either, but that's the way it is. So that's what we've got there. One more thing here. We do have some new sanctions on Russia. Sam, what can you tell us about this here?
Oh, boy. Well, Trump's been not too pleased with Vladimir Putin. He's saying, you know, you're kind of yanking my chain, Vlad. Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, he's kind of giving me everything I want. You, on the other hand, promised the sky and give us pretty much nothing when it comes to ending this war. So what Trump's threatening now is to support a bill that would impose 500% tariffs, not on Russia, but rather on nations that buy really any energy from Russia. So that'd be oil, gas, uranium, and other exports. That's a big deal, as I think about a third of Russia's economy is dependent on energy exports. The House and the Senate, they say they're prepared to move forward with this legislation. The BBC reports that Russia has made over $970 billion in fossil fuel exports since the war in Ukraine began. You ask, well, how on earth is this happening? I thought they're being sanctioned. Other countries are saying they're not buying Russian oil. Well, there's kind of some play in the joints there, as a major portion of those sales are actually coming from the EU, which has been buying Russian gas indirectly through the country of Turkey.
That's annoying.
It's annoying.
That's very, very annoying. It's like the meme of, you see the picture of the rockets shooting at each other. I think it might be Iron Dome rockets, but it applies here as well. My tax dollars are the rockets coming in, and then somehow also my tax dollars are the rockets going out to stop those rockets. That's what this feels like here, Sam. When we come back on the other side of the break, I want you to tell our audience why you're so miffed at Turkey for this, because this is really just disgraceful. So we'll get back to that in just a moment here, folks, on Financial Issues. Hope that you'll join the conversation on the live chat. As always, we'll be right back after this break. Stick with us.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Through Crossroads Kids Club, lives like Dali's are being changed all over the world.
When I was 8 years old, my parents separated temporarily. It made me feel lost, empty, and without direction. Until one day, I went with my cousins to the Crossroads Club. This led me to know Lord Jesus and accept Him in my heart. He changed my life, and I don't feel lonely anymore.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachourschools.com.
My baby was like this big, and I saw his heart beating on the screen. I went from, I don't want this baby, to talking to my child on the screen. That sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Hey, we'll get a little chat rundown early here, folks. Dave and Darlene, good to see you guys. Nelson, hello, brother. Robert from Mississippi, great to see you this morning, Robert. We've also got George in North Carolina. Great to see you there. James in South Carolina, and Brian and Kara in Illinois. Stephen in Oklahoma. Hi, Stephen. Hello, James in Texas as well. Uncle John is with us in Indianapolis, Indiana. Good morning to you, brother. Great to see you guys. Daryl from Texas. Great to see Daryl as well. Hey, folks, by the way, thank you all also for your prayers for Darlene. She'll be with us, God willing, tomorrow, so we'll be sure to get an update from her on how she's doing. So, Sam, let's jump back here to what we were talking about just before that break there. So I'm really just bothered by the actions of Turkey. First of all, as a member of NATO, I think is just mind-boggling. It's tough to even find the words there. Sam, tell our audience why this is ridiculous.
Well, it's insane, right? Because the whole point of NATO is to stop Russia. It's to be a buffer against Russia. And here you have Turkey playing both sides, basically playing the fence where they're funding Russia's war machine indirectly by allowing them to sell oil. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's and this is, look, this is one of the problems with these globalist, almost mega empires that we have. I'm not incredibly comfortable with any of them personally. I will say I think NATO serves a bit of a better purpose than the worthless United Nations does.
Because NATO, in theory, is a purely defensive pact. Exactly. It has no other governmental purpose. It's not trying to espouse utopian ideas. Exactly. It's purely a defensive union.
Exactly. There's a couple problems I can think of it, Sam, right off the bat. Number one, national borders are a good thing. Like, just let nations be nations. Let countries be countries. Let alliances be alliances. Alliances are fine. They're good. But national borders are a good thing. And this really gets to the second point. Number two is if you have these types of alliances, it allows for bad actors to get in there. Bad actors like potentially Turkey. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So at any rate, that's kind of what's going on, sort of the latest update in the Russian-Ukraine war there. I am hopeful and prayerful that we'll see an end to that soon.
I'm thinking this is going to put the nail in the coffin. I've been calling for this for a long time. It's not enough just to sanction Russia. The United States also has to punish everyone else, each and everyone else, even if there are quote-unquote friends, if they're helping Russia in any way. That's the only way you can cut them off.
Absolutely. That's really well said there, Sam. Hey, some of you had mentioned in the chat CS53. That one is doing pretty well this morning here. So I just wanted to make mention. I did see that there. Also, some folks are wondering what a capybara actually is, as it is Happy National
It's basically a giant guinea pig.
Yeah. So there you go.
And they're awesome.
Yep. A pretty large rodent there as well. George saying it's the largest rodent. So good stuff there. All right, let's move to the markets here, Sam. So yesterday they had a pretty fine day. They began hot out the gate. They continued that way. NVIDIA was surging, bringing the tech-heavy NASDAQ with it. The tech darling actually became the first company ever yesterday to hit $4 trillion in market cap.
Mind-boggling number.
That is insane. So it has been a wild ride for Jensen and the Huang gang, as I call them, Jensen Huang and his gang, since May of 2023, as really that was kind of the turning point for the markets in general. NVIDIA led that, and with some bumps in the road here and there, as to be expected, it really has not stopped in the last 2 years. And once again, folks, a huge part of that is this AI trend, this move in technology. NVIDIA's been on the forefront of that for sure. So the markets benefited from it yesterday. By midday, all three indices were slightly up. By late afternoon, they were firmly positive. The tech-heavy NASDAQ leading the way, and that's how they ended. The Dow was up 0.5%, the S&P up 2/3, almost of 1%, and the NASDAQ up almost a full percent, hit a new record high yesterday morning. The pre-market's a little more muted as we were looking at them earlier, and that's where they're sitting this morning right now, all priced into open just below the flat line. So kind of a rather calm counterswing from yesterday. Sam, let's keep on moving here with what's going on in the financial news headlines. We're seeing some more job gains for American workers right off the bat. I like that. What can you tell us about it?
Right. It's not just the stock market that's doing okay. It's also the job market as well, especially for Americans, as President Trump continues his crackdown on illegal immigration. The Labor Department's latest jobs report shows the number of foreign-born workers has dropped by almost 350,000 from May to June, while on the flip side, U.S.-born workers increased by 830,000 during that same exact time period. In fact, American jobs have increased by over 2 million since Trump's second term began back in January. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that American-born workers have accounted, in fact, for all of the job gains since President Trump took office. And as I said, a lot of this has to do with his crackdown on illegal immigration. A quick update on that. Last month, the Trump administration announced there were zero, I'll say that again, zero illegal border crossings in the month of May.
just a slight decrease from what we saw in the Biden administration. It's just slight.
Mild.
Just a mild decrease. Yeah, boy, what a difference 7 months makes, folks. I mean,
and here we were told this was an intractable crisis. It required all these acts of Congress. Apparently, all you had to do was just close the border, say, sorry, you can't come in. That's the law. Them's the rules. Sorry.
Last time I checked as well, Sam, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, folks. Anyone in the chat can correct me, but isn't it a job, and I'd even say a right of a government to establish borders and then protect those borders for the benefit of natural-born citizens? Is that too much to ask? I don't think it's too much to ask. I think that's actually the job of governmental leaders.
It's actually a law.
Right.
Congress passed a law saying it is illegal to enter the country illegally.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. Folks, it's not that complicated. Boy, what a difference 7 months makes here, Sam. You know, under Trump, you've got American workers going back to work, which, by the way, I really like to see that. I'm not against foreign-born workers working as well, but I think when you're talking about the role of government in particular, it is the job of government first to protect and uphold the rights of natural-born citizens. Now, the beauty of this country is that you can come from another country the right way into this country legally and become a citizen and then get all the same rights of citizenship that natural-born citizens have. It's a beautiful thing. But nonetheless, it's the job of the government to protect the rights of citizens. And I think this is one way to see that when you're seeing jobs increasing for American citizens. Also, under Trump, seeing the border get closed. National sovereignty. We talked about this in the last segment. It's a good thing. It's exciting stuff here, folks. And it's simple stuff, Sam. It's just common sense. You know, it's just common sense for a government to act in the benefit of its people. I believe that's a God-ordained right of the government. But not only that, that's a God-ordained responsibility. You know, we talk about, you've said this before, Sam, Romans 13. When you look at Romans 13 and you think about it from the perspective of the citizen, how we have to respect the governing authorities, there's also a responsibility of the government, based on Romans 13, to honor God and to be good stewards of its people as well. And I think we're starting to see that here. I really do. And
that's what the founding fathers said. That's what Jefferson said, is that governments do have a duty to their people. Yep. And if they stop fulfilling that duty, then they're illegitimate. Then the people have a responsibility to do something.
Right. And it's not just a right, but it's a responsibility of the people to do something about it. Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, folks, we have that in this country. The beauty of the American experience is we have the ability to peacefully overthrow a government that we disagree with. It's called an election. And we just saw that 8 months ago, where the people came together and overthrew a corrupt government and replaced it essentially with another one. I mean, it's the same country, but it's a different administration. That's a beautiful thing about our country. It really is. So speaking of other interesting things here, and maybe not quite as beautiful, but interesting nonetheless, there is a new anti-woke ETF out there. Sam, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, this is really interesting. This comes from former Doge advisor, a guy by the name of James Fishback. I wanted to say Fitzpatrick, but that is not his name. James Fishback. He launched his new anti-DEI ETF this week. It's called Azoria 500 Meritocracy ETF, ticker symbol SPXM. We do have a clip of him talking about it for the announcement. Here he is.
Of the 500 companies in the S&P index, 36 maintain these anti-meritocratic racial and gender hiring quotas, and the consequences of them are undeniable. Diminished innovation, inability to compete across industries, and a corporate culture that treats employees like tokens, and a 21st century caste system. And their returns are suffering as a result.
So what is this thing? Well, it's essentially an S&P 500 index fund accepting about 40 companies that explicitly impose very strict DEI hiring targets. Okay. This would include companies like Nike, Intel, Airbnb, just to name a few of them. Basically companies that explicitly say, we're going to hire 20% black people, 20% women, 20% Hispanics, and so on. This ETF says, no, we're not going to do that. So it's exciting in that sense. The problem is, for our purposes, just because it's anti-DEI, anti-woke, that doesn't necessarily mean it's biblically responsible. In fact, the fund includes several of the worst offenders when it comes to being biblically responsible and violating biblical values, including Amazon, which of course donates to abortion and LGBT causes, sells pornography on its website. CVS and Walgreens, both of them sell the abortion pill. And worst of all, maybe Disney, which propagates radical gender ideology to children.
Sam, that's spot on. So I posed the question up at the top of the show, is this ETF worth buying? And we would say absolutely not. You should not buy it. We can celebrate it. It's good to see that. We want to see anti-DEI stuff in the workplace. But for a biblically responsible investor, you should have no part in this. Definitionally, this ETF is not biblically responsible. Biblically responsible ETFs and mutual funds and stocks are more than just not being DEI. We love that, but it's more than that. Just like you had said, there, Sam, there's several serious problematic companies that are included in this. The importance of having a portfolio that is cohesively pure in all its investments, folks, I can't stress that enough. This is, after all, God's money. It is God's money. And so we don't want even a single cent of it to be included in these types of things that will grieve his heart, like the abortion pill, like LGBTQ causes, like pornography, promoting radical gender ideology to children. Those are wicked, evil, vile things. We want no part of that. So Sam, really good stuff there. Good to see that. We're seeing this movement continuing on, but you should have no part in a ETF like this, since it is, after all, not biblically responsible. Folks, a couple things to keep in mind here. Shanna will be back tomorrow. I want you to get your calls queued up early, especially for those of you who have to leave us. We hope that you'll join us for the show tomorrow. It's going to be a great time. Shanna will be back. We'll also be in Bible study before the show, 6:30 Eastern time. We'll be in Daniel chapter 7. I'm starting the prophetic section of Daniel, so if you want to listen to me struggle through that, we'll have some fun with that. No, it'll be a good time. For the rest of you, we got more financial issues coming up right after this break. Stick with us.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
When it comes to money, I always have so many questions. I never know where to go to get answers to those questions. They never really teach you this stuff in school, like some of the best ways to handle it, how to save, when to invest, where to invest, even just what to do with the money. And if I put it in the stock market, what's the best way to protect from losing it all? That fear can be paralyzing. You don't really know what decisions to make. As a Christian, I don't want to give my money to people who are going to use it for things that God hates. When I discovered financial issues, it was like a burden was lifted off my shoulders. Not only did I gain access to a simple investment strategy that I can manage myself, I also have the peace of mind that my money will not be going to companies that actively promote things that God hates. Financial issues has allowed me to experience peace in my investments.
Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
One of the emphases of preborn has been ultrasound in two ways. An ultrasound machine if a pregnancy clinic doesn't have one, and then an ultrasound session, which we underwrite hundreds of thousands of those. We've seen over and over again the dramatic results that when a woman encounters her baby for the first time and hears that heartbeat, she realizes the magnitude of what's happening here, that there is somebody else, that's her baby. So this is why preborn pushes out ultrasound as much as we possibly can. Preborn has seen over 200,000 babies saved, over 59,000 people come to Christ, populating earth and eternity, life for this life and life forever. Save the baby's life, but save the mother's life so that she can lead that baby to Christ. If we're bringing people into this world and the mother doesn't receive Christ and the child is born and the child lives its life and doesn't receive Christ, this is not a good end. And so we have to have the gospel as part and parcel and really the heartbeat of what Preborn is.
Welcome back, folks. Financial issues, always a pleasure when I get to invite guests on the program who are experts in their field. And boy, I've got a real treat for you here. My friend Debbie Wuthnow, she's the president of IVoter Guide. She's also the vice president of AFA Action. She does great work in helping raise awareness to the regular American voter and telling us what we need to know about the candidates that we vote for. As we just mentioned in that last segment, folks, you know, one of the beautiful things about our country is we have the ability, based on the leadership that the founding fathers started for us, to be able to overthrow a corrupt government. And the beauty of this nation is we can do it peacefully, and that's through the election process. So important for you to be able to follow the work that Debbie and her team does. Debbie, welcome back to the show. I'm delighted to have you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me, Seth.
Absolutely. So let's just start off here really quickly. Give our listeners a quick reminder. We might have some new listeners also. What's the purpose of iVoter Guide, and how can listeners utilize it and use it in their voting decisions?
Well, the purpose of iVoter Guide is that, you know, as citizens in America, as you shared, we have the obligation, the responsibility, the right to elect our representatives. But too many people just don't know anything about the candidates on their ballot. And so iVoter Guide was created as a Christian ministry by some faithful patriots who realized that even though they knew their legislators, they didn't know anything about the people on their ballot. So we research candidates on the ballot from the top of the ticket, U.S. president, down to, in many cases, school board races, local races, including Congress, state legislatures, governors. And we really look at what candidates have done, not just what they say they're going to do, because sometimes those are different. So iVoter Guide is that tool, that resource, first stop for you before you vote to know where your candidates stand. And we cover about 13,000 candidates every election cycle. And it's a great resource of, we evaluate their political philosophy. We look at what they've done with their money, how they voted. And it's easy to use and personalized at iVoterGuide.com.
That's awesome. iVoterGuide.com. Debbie, real quickly with that, I personally love when I've used iVoter Guide, when I'm looking for, to use the technical term, kind of a podunk candidate, like you had mentioned school board races. I don't know who these people are. They're not national figures, but you guys have the information on these people to be able to know, hey, this is where this person actually stands. That's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing.
And there are thousands of school board candidates out there, so we do not have the bandwidth at this current phase to cover all of them. But our goal is, we're parents and grandparents. We realize the importance of school boards, so we research as many as we can. And it's hundreds of candidates every year at the school board level. And it's again, personalized. So if you enter your address and we're covering your school board, it will be on there. We are covering some Pennsylvania ones this year and several other states that are going on this year as well.
That's great. Quickly, Debbie, also, I think this is so important for our listeners. Why is it important to get involved in those, I guess to call them little elections? Because, we think about the general election, we think about the midterms. We don't often think about those little ones. Why is that important? Why should we get involved in those?
Well, there's multiple reasons. One of them is that it actually impacts your family more directly.
Yeah.
The people at your local level determine tax rates. They set policies for your schools. They set curriculum for the students that are in the area. There's just a lot of local things that impact you. And the other reason to think about it is that's the farm team. That's where new politicians cut their teeth and learn, how do we run a campaign? How do I communicate with constituents? What's my persona going to be? So it's a way of vetting and training those people who are going to move up to be future state legislators, congressmen, senators. So it's really important to participate at every election at every level.
Yeah. No, that's great, Debbie. So, part of the reason that I wanted to have you on, particularly right now in July of 2025, I don't want our listeners or myself, frankly, to be lulled to sleep in an off year. We just had a huge election. Some are calling it the biggest election of our lives. We got got Donald Trump into office. That's wonderful. We're celebrating that. The temptation, I think, is for many conservatives to just kick back, relax, and say, okay, I did my job. Things are good. But we have a midterm coming up next year, and we have elections this year as well. How would you encourage us to not just kick back and relax, but to keep on going here as we think about the upcoming elections that are quite important as well?
Well, I would point to a quote that came from Ronald Reagan. I believe that liberty requires eternal vigilance. If we become complacent, the other side will wake up. So historically, the party that wins the White House will lose seats in the off year because their people become complacent. And then the ability to move that agenda forward is limited or halted or stopped. So it's really important that we engage in 2026, which would be called the midterms, and keep the control of the House and the Senate so that the President Trump's agenda can move forward. If he loses one or both of those, not much is going to happen. Not a lot happens in Washington, but even less will happen if it becomes like that. And there are states this year that are having elections that are this year that people need to pay attention to. The complacency factor, we've already seen it in play this year because at school board races, the turnout's even less than it might normally be, and it's normally pretty pathetic at about 6 to 10%, because people see that Trump got into office and they're like, oh, he signed all those executive orders. There's no DEI in schools. There's only 2 sexes. They can't do all of those things that are fabulous executive orders. But those are not into law, and those are not necessarily being policies followed in your state or your community. So you really need to engage at all levels and not become complacent. Because it'll make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So Debbie, let's split it up here. The 2025 elections, and then we'll talk about 2026 with the midterms in just a moment. What are some key battleground areas, candidates, voting issues that we should be aware of in this particular election cycle?
Well, in this year, there's 2 states that have statewide and state legislative elections this year. So the Virginia House of Burgesses, or their legislative body, they're all getting elected, including their governor. There's just a lot on the ballot in Virginia. That is a state that has gone both directions. It leans more blue to purple, as you know. So that's going to be key because currently we have a Republican governor there, Youngkin, who's termed out. They've got control of the state house. So that's in play. New Jersey is another state that does their state legislature, not as much of a Republican state, but again, they try to move pro-family policies there as well. But this year, for most of us, the things that'll be on your ballot are your school boards and your local elections and some ballot measures. So iVoter Guide is covering some key school boards in Georgia, in Texas, in Florida, in Pennsylvania, Colorado. We're working with local groups, local churches that have people on fire that are going to turn out and vote, that are recruiting good candidates to run. And then we move in the lane of giving the information to the voters about those candidates, all the candidates that are on the ballot. And this year we've started something new. We identify the key school board races where we can impact, and then we layer on top of that the municipal races for mayor and city council, because those are those other down ballot, nobody knows anything about them, but yet they control a lot in your city. So that's what we're doing in 2025, and just trying to keep people awake and educated in their role in the electoral process, their responsibility as Christians to be good stewards of their citizenship.
Oh, yeah. That is awesome that you guys are doing that. Let's move now to 2026. Of course, as you mentioned, those key midterm elections. I can't imagine personally, Debbie, what would have happened had the Republicans not had control of the House or the Senate with things like the Big Beautiful Bill and other things like that. So it's, as you said, very, very important to keep control of those. What should we be aware of as we're looking towards the midterms now?
Well, be aware that there's not as many swing seats as you think there are. People think that the whole House is going to be on the ballot, but 95% of those seats are in very strongly Republican or Democrat areas.
Right.
So the thing I would point out to you is, President Trump talks about the people who voted against his Big Beautiful Bill or didn't support some of his nominees, and he's going to primary them. The primary is really when something happens. So I would ask your listeners to really engage and vow right now they're going to vote in the primary, because that's your best opportunity to pick a true conservative, really, if that's what you want on the ballot. That's where the real choice happens. There's a couple of resignations of people who are not running in 2026. There's a House seat in the Omaha area of Nebraska that's currently held by a Republican. That could potentially be a seat that flips as it goes to an open seat. And there's quite a few open Senate seats that are going to be on the ballot. So we'll be watching in North Carolina. Tom Tillis just resigned. We'll be watching open seat in Michigan. John Ossoff's on the ballot in Georgia. There's actually an opportunity to pick up and increase the majority in the Senate, but it's going to take everybody being engaged and not just sitting home. If we watch how in 2020, how Ossoff got elected, or whatever year that was, it was people didn't turn out for that special election. Yeah. So it really is important that you vote in every election and know who you're voting for.
So well said. Debbie, quickly here. Yesterday, Sam and I discussed a very interesting headline we saw. So the IRS actually made a recent ruling allowing churches to now not only maintain their nonprofit status, but also endorse political candidates. There's obviously still some legal movements happening here, but I personally am very excited about this. What do you make of this? Are there things we should be concerned about this, or is this a step in the right direction for religious freedom?
I think this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
The IRS says churches could have done a lot more. There's that Johnson Amendment that Trump will talk about. But for years, there have been pastors who've given very election pro-voting, pro-candidate sermons, sent it to the IRS, and they do nothing. So I don't think this has changed the law. What I think this changes is the awareness and letting churches and pastors know that you can tell your congregation about, preach to them, teach them about political issues. You can even now endorse, which that was something that previously we were, even First Liberty Institute would say, don't do that. So it's a great opportunity for our voice to really be heard.
Debbie, that's awesome. We appreciate you so much. One more time, tell our listeners, how can they learn more about you and the work that you and your team do?
Well, iVoterGuide.com is your election resource. So bookmark it. I would encourage you to sign up for our email list, because we will let you know when there are special elections. Those are great opportunities where very few people vote, but it's important for every vote actually has more power. Sign up for iVoterGuide's email list. If you want to engage in what we do, we have volunteer positions for you to help evaluate candidates, but just iVoterGuide.com. Go there first before you vote.
Awesome. Debbie, thank you so much for the great work that you do and joining me on the show today. It was a pleasure. Folks, again, that's Debbie Wuthnow, President of iVoter Guide and Vice President of AFA Action. Always a pleasure to have her on the show with me. We got more financial issues coming up on the other side of this break. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later, they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. On top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn.
Then they sat me down. If you were to die today, do you think you would go to heaven? And I was like, no. Keeping the child was my first stepping stone. And ever since then, God has cleaned me up from the inside out.
Help support women in need. Go to preborn.com/FISM.
From the time Crossroads began back in 1998, our sole focus was on reaching children in public schools in the United States. And then in 2017, we decided to translate our curriculum into Spanish, primarily so that we could serve Spanish-speaking churches and students in the U.S. And as I was connecting with a pastor in Chicago and telling him about the materials that Crossroads had in Spanish and about what Kids Club was all about, he said, "Hey, I have a friend in Mexico who I think would really benefit from these materials and your approach to working with children." And so I began the conversation with Rolando Gonzalez. March of 2018, I traveled for the first time to Guadalajara and met with Rolando, and right away we just connected on a heart level. And so we set a team in August of 2018 to train leaders here in Mexico, and the first international kids clubs were born.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachourschools.com.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Always a pleasure to have Debbie Wuthnow on the program, folks. I appreciate her and the work that her team over at iVoter Guide do. Yeah, iVoterGuide.com. Easy for me to say. iVoterGuide.com is the place to go for that. Today's show, folks, brought to you in part by our friends at Samaritan Ministries. So appreciate the work that they do as well for protecting our healthcare rights. Health sharing really is what it is. Biblical health sharing. So check them out at SamaritanMinistries.org. SamaritanMinistries.org. That's the health sharing ministry that we use here at Financial Issues. All us full-time staff members are also members of Samaritan Ministries. So I've had such a good experience with them, and I just appreciate them so much. All right, let's hear from Craig Haugaard with today's Ag Update, and then we'll hear from some of you, some of your questions we've gotten in the last day or two. Here is Craig Haugaard with today's Ag Report.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for July 10th. Even though the corn markets closed higher yesterday across the board, it didn't necessarily feel like a bounce-back day. The weather remains favorable for most of the Midwest, with rains due for about 75% of the Corn Belt over the next 10 days. As a result, U.S. corn yield expectations continue to inch higher. December corn finished yesterday a penny and a quarter higher at $4.15 and a half. Soybeans saw their sell-off continue for the third day in a row. Now, one factor continuing to keep pressure on soybeans is a lack of new crop demand. Export sales are running 15% ahead of last year, but it's still the second lowest number since 2005. China remains absent from the U.S. soybean market, but the U.S. is now competitive with Brazil. Worth noting that last year, new crop sales to China began to show up in late July, so hopefully history will repeat itself again this year. November beans finished yesterday 10 and a quarter cents lower at 10.07 and a quarter. Wheat is dealing with a less than optimal harvest as areas of hard red winter country are getting more rain than it is desired, which is leading to some real quality concerns. That was enough to keep the bears on the sidelines yesterday. The world markets are also kind of stalled out, with the European Union futures closing 3 cents per bushel higher, while Russian FOB values were unchanged in yesterday's trade. Minneapolis September wheat was a penny and 3/4 higher at $6.31 and a half. Kansas City rose by a penny and a half to close at $5.24, and Chicago was 3/4 cent lower at $5.47. Cotton futures continue to be range bound. December futures ended yesterday's session 40 points higher at 67.78. On the other hand, we had livestock futures kind of mixed. August live cattle were 20 cents lower at $219.77 per hundredweight. August feeder cattle were $1.35 higher at $320.47 per hundred. And we had August lean hog futures 45 cents better, closing out the session at $107.22 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures had a very lethargic session. At the closing bell, August futures were a single point higher at $17.92. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
There he is, our friend Craig Haugaard, giving us what we need to know there. All right, folks, let's take a look now here at the markets, what they have done as they open. Mixed territory, kind of hanging around the flat line. The Dow Jones slightly above the flat line. The S&P 500 slightly below. And the NASDAQ is slightly further down below. It's trending right around 1/8% or so. So that's what the markets are looking like here.
Although I do see that the NASDAQ did touch a new record today.
It did. Yeah, yes. So I believe that was actually, I think that was yesterday that it hit the record. And so it was going off of that record today. So if it has a positive day today, it'll be a new record for the NASDAQ. Yeah, the major indices, they've been hitting hard. They've been firing off on all cylinders here. So speaking of which, Sam, let's get to a couple of questions that we have here. So this is related a little bit to what we just talked about with Debbie. And of course, we talked about that IRS ruling about churches being able to promote political candidates on the show yesterday. So John from Alabama had an interesting comment in the chat yesterday. Sam, go ahead and read John's for us.
Well, John has quite the spicy take here. He says churches should not be nonprofits, in his opinion.
So, John, that is an interesting take, and you're not the first person who I've heard say that. There are many out there who do believe that churches should not have nonprofit status, but also not be beholden by nonprofit status.
And am I right that that's the real concern about it, is get rid of the nonprofit status so the government can't tell you what to do?
Exactly. And knowing John from the chat, I'm thinking that that's what you're thinking there. And I've spoken with many well-founded biblical believers as well who believe the same thing. Here's my take on this, John. I do think it is good for churches to have nonprofit status simply because of the question of how is the church getting its funding? The church should be funded by the tithe.
That's what I was going to say. Well, if it's not a nonprofit, what is it?
Exactly.
It's not a for-profit.
It has to be funded by something. And if it's a for-profit, then you're selling something. And that can get real hairy with churches. Truthfully, the historical example I can think of is from 500 years ago when the Roman Catholic Church sold indulgences to fund the building of New St. Peter's Basilica. That can get real hairy. You can see certain mega churches who somehow they keep their nonprofit status, but they also profit off of book sales and different things like that. It could just get real confusing there. And so in my opinion, I do think that it's best for churches to maintain nonprofit status simply because, if for no other reason, the biblical model of the tithe is really what funds the work of ministry. You see, in the Old Testament, the tithe was what paid the priesthood. That's what allowed the priest to be able to do their priestly duty. Their tithe, that priesthood itself, that was their inheritance. The Levites' inheritance was that. They did not get land. They got the priesthood and the tithe that came with it. I believe that transfers over to the new covenant, where now we really, in a sense, our tithe is what allows the pastor to be the pastor. That pays his salary, that keeps the lights on, that keeps the air conditioning on. And that's the way that the church should be funded, is by the generosity of the people. That's part of why, by the way, it's so important that churches don't misuse the tithe, because it's not only is it a gift, but it's also ultimately a gift from the hand of God through his people. So churches need to be very careful with how they spend their tithe money. But John, it's an interesting point that you make there, definitely. Hopefully this ruling will solve that, because it will allow churches to maintain their nonprofit status, but also still be funded in the way they should be, which is through the tithe.
In my opinion, the only reason a nonprofit, even a garbage one, should get its nonprofit taken away is if they actually become for-profit. I don't see how whatever controversial opinion or position you have on something, that suddenly makes you a for-profit business when you're obviously a nonprofit. It's very odd.
If, what's that? There's this one huge organization that totally doesn't murder babies, but they get status, or they got status. They got funding from the federal government.
Well, you might be talking about Planned Parenthood, but I've been informed what they primarily do
They do healthcare.
Yeah, they do healthcare, cancer screenings, things like that.
Mammograms, all that stuff. Yeah. No, false. Sarcasm. That's all they do is abortions. That they would be, I don't know how they're a nonprofit, because they get government funding, but that's beyond me. I don't know how that works. Either way, I'm celebrating in the fact that they will be losing that government funding very soon. But John, it's a good point there. I appreciate you bringing that up. Elsewhere, Sam, we got a question from Timothy yesterday. You want to go ahead and read his?
Timothy wants to know about the future of CD86, which is quite the volatile stock.
It's an interesting one, Timothy. I can't speak to the future of it. I don't have a crystal ball or any of that stuff, but I can tell you, this one is a pretty volatile stock. It's connected to a very highly public figure. And listen, there's part of, Sam and I were talking about this yesterday. That's part of the reason why this is an aggressive stock. It's interesting, Sam, because in the last couple of days, it shot way down. But now what I'm told, Sam, is that it's going back up again.
It's almost remade that. Yeah. It's well on its way back up. It lost, I don't know, about 20 points or so the other day. It's on its way to making that back up. So, and I want to encourage people, if you want to look at this stock, CD86, just type it in on Google or something like that. Yes, if you look at the 1 day or the 5 day, the moves look very dramatic. I'm looking at it right now. There's basically a cliff fall off on July 7th, but it really comes right
was
back
a reason
up.
for that.
But if you go out broader, the 6 month or 1 year or 5 year, you'll see it's had much bigger fall offs than that, and it's come right back. It is a volatile stock, though.
Absolutely. It's something to consider, folks. I mean, look, if you have a long time horizon, if you have a good risk tolerance, and if you're able to say, you know what, I'm going to invest in a company like this, and I know there's going to be days where it goes down. It's going to come back up. It's going to go down. For the long term, I'm trusting that it has a chance to do well. That's kind of the nature of an aggressive holding, Sam. Is that this is a company that, look, you're hoping that it grows aggressively. So if you're someone who is older, you don't have the risk tolerance, you don't have the time, might not be the best position for you. But anyway, that's kind of all that we'll say about that.
Peaks and valleys.
Yep, exactly right. Peaks and valleys. So in some other news, folks, we got the Fed meeting minutes. They released yesterday. Really nothing new. This was from their June 17th and 18th meeting. They basically kind of diverged about how aggressively they'd be willing to cut interest rates. They were split between concerns over tariff-fueled inflation, signs of labor market, yada, yada, yada. They're all in wait-and-see mode. No surprises here. But we got those meeting minutes yesterday. Also, some news out this morning. 6 Secret Service service agents were suspended for their really glistening performance during Trump's Pennsylvania assassination attempt back last year in July. That was sarcasm, of course, as well, folks. By the way, we are coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that, interestingly enough, Sam. I wonder if
and
that
we
was
still know
part of the reason
nothing
why.
about the shooter and how he did what he did.
Exactly
Nothing
right.
at all.
Exactly right. That is a concerning thing. So we know nothing about that. We have no Jeffrey Epstein list. Hopefully, folks, you are beginning to learn the lesson that hopefully you already learned, which is basically, if you're going to put your trust in your government, not a good place to put your trust in. Well, a far better place to put your trust in God and in his word, which, by the way, says this as we close our show, Proverbs 15:22. Without counsel, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. Folks, there's a really big virtue of having an army of people who can give you godly counsel. And that's true whether you're in your 60s or whether you're young in your 30s like me, especially if you're a young person like me and you don't know a lot. You need people who are older, who can speak into your life, who can show you the way to honor God, especially if you're a young man, older men, if you're a young woman, older women, to be able to show you this. Often, this is the way God speaks to us. He speaks through his word, but he also speaks to us through the counselors around us. Be very keen to listen to the voice of God through the people around you that he has given, and make sure to have a multitude of counselors so that your plans may be established. Great to be here with you all, folks. It was a joy. God willing, we'll do it again next time. Hope you have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow for more financial issues. Remember, it's all his. See you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.
You guys are the man. I encourage everybody, partner, portfolio after portfolio, you hear the stories. It works. And you guys make it possible. And I thank you for that.
Join our partnership community by visiting financialissues.org/join.
Everyone keeps talking about how important it is to invest. But every time I try to understand it, I just get more and more confused.
I get it. Stocks are scary. The market's
investing isn't something you do casually. It's a calculated process that requires...
I've had enough of the noise.
If you want some help with investing, you should check out Financial Issues.
I started investing today. Since getting connected to Financial Issues, I've had no more worries. Go to financialissues.org to become a partner today.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
I found out I was pregnant when I was 21 years old. For me, I was scared, I was shaking. I Googled places to abort. We drive there, and as soon as we get there, I open the door, and the first thing that I see is a bunch of Bible verses in the walls. They gave me a little counseling session, they gave me the pregnancy test again, and they do an ultrasound. And that's when everything changed. When I saw my baby, and when I heard her heartbeat, that was it. We decided with my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband, to continue the pregnancy together. We started coming to the classes, doing our homework, getting counseling together. We've seen the hand of God ever since we stepped into the pregnancy center.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Crossroads Kids Club, lives like Dali's are being changed all over the world.
When I was 8 years old, my parents separated temporarily, and my mom and I moved houses. But I started to discover pornography that helped me develop behavior that was rebellious, immoral, and bad. It made me feel lost, empty, and without direction. Until one day, I went with my cousins to the Crossroads Club. I really liked the Bible teachings, how they mixed them with games and fun. This led me to know Lord Jesus and accept Him in my heart. He forgave me and changed my behavior. He changed my life, and I don't feel lonely anymore.
Reaching kids with the hope of the gospel in schools and across the world. You can change a young life today at reachOurschools.com.
My name is David Hunsinger. I live in Edgewater Park, New Jersey. I came across financial issues by accident. I would believe it was on a certain TV station at that time. I got interested in finding out more, so I went online to find out more, and that's when I became a more active participant in financial issues. I did have some interest in investing prior to getting involved with FISM. Biblical investing I thought was more important, so obviously I changed my approach. I know I'm much happier for it. I'm probably more at ease now. It's probably the best way to sum it up in terms of I don't necessarily worry about if this is going to happen, if that's going to happen. I don't worry about that. If I was to encourage somebody to participate in FISM, I would use myself as an example. I've been very pleased to participate. If God's happy, I'm happy.
Align your investments with your faith. Become an FISM partner today at financialissues.org.